Hey, thank you very much, and thank you for having me again. Last time I did this, I didn't actually have a voice. I was trying to whisper on stage, so it's nice to actually be able to talk this time round. But thanks for having me. I'm Sophie Harker. I'm an aerospace engineer at BAE Systems. I'm going to talk a little bit about throughout my career, get out my embarrassing team photos as well, so you get to see them too, and then finish up with just a little bit of advice I can show you from my career. So back when I was, say, 15, 16, is probably where this story begins of when I wanted to become an engineer. I didn't really know what I wanted to do in life. I was really good at maths, but I didn't know what I wanted to do with it. Everyone kind of just went, oh, well, you can be a teacher, or you could teach maths, or you can go into finance. And I was like, well, I don't really want to do either of those things, so what do I do? So I carried on kind of regardless, and then about 16 years old, I was really fortunate and I got to go to Kennedy Space Center out in the US. And when I was there, I watched this film about, there was a woman on Mars and she dropped a photo of her family, something. To be honest, I can't really remember it, but there was a slogan on the end that just said, this could be you. And I remember being 16 going, yeah, that could be me. I would quite like to be an astronaut, and believe it or not, I still do. That is still the dream, it's still what I'm aiming for, and you'll see quite a lot of space theme throughout this because of that. But I kind of came back to the UK at 16 and kind of did everything I could that could kind of get me involved in the space industry. I didn't really know what engineering was at this point. My family background is not in engineering or STEM at all. My dad's a carpenter and my mum is a teaching assistant in a primary school, so it was just not in the family to do that sort of thing. But when I was 19 years old, I was actually already studying maths at this point. Now I'll get onto my photos. Finally, I got to meet Dr. Helen Sharman, who's this one on the end here. For those that don't know, Helen Sharman was the first Briton in space, so the first British person in space back in '91. And I was 19 in that really awkward photo with my emo fringe as well. And that was the first time anyone actually said to me, have you thought about engineering? So I was 19 by this point, genuinely thought it was someone that sort of came and repaired your satellite dish or repaired your washing machine. That's the only exposure I ever had to the word. So for those that are studying engineering now, you're well ahead of me at this point, because I was already at university at this point. So I then spent the next 3 years studying maths at the University of Nottingham. Rather than putting 2 graduation photos, I thought I would just put the one. This is my graduation ball instead. And I had a most amazing time, really, really enjoyed my time there. But I thought maybe I should probably do some actual engineering experience before dedicating my life to it. I sort of tailored my degree towards applied maths, but I didn't leave maths. So between my 3rd, 4th years, so between my degree and master's years, I actually got an internship at BAE Systems doing software engineering down in Christchurch in Dorset, not in New Zealand, unfortunately. So I spent 3 months there, had never done any software engineering before in my entire life. It was a bit of a learning curve, but I absolutely adored my time there. I had so much fun. So I went back to university, graduated with my master's in maths, and then joined BAE Systems on the graduate scheme. So I don't have the normal route in. I don't have sort of the apprentice route that sort of trains you up, and I didn't have an engineering route either. I didn't know anything about aerospace or planes. I'll talk about sort of my graduate scheme in a moment, but when I joined BAE, I knew absolutely nothing, and they knew this, but I was willing to learn, and I was willing to say, okay, I don't know about this, but I want to know about it. And I did all sorts of strange things, like I got the top trumps of fast jets and just played top trumps for like a year to learn about all the different types of aircraft and their capabilities. But so I went on and did 4 placements. So I'll talk a bit about my internship and about all the sort of placements I did on my grad scheme, because they all sort of feed into what made me me and how I've ended up where I am. So this one on the, if I can go on top left, is a Falcon truck. So Falcon is kind of like, in a really simple terms, the Army's version of the internet. And what I did when I was on my internship is take a program they already had to do with Falcon, and I turned it into an app that could be used on a tablet. And as far as I'm aware, that app is still being used today. So straight out of university, straight off the bat, I was creating things that are used operationally now. So back to uni then back onto the grad scheme. We'll work from this bottom one down on the left here. So this was my first ever sort of permanent placement at BAE Systems on the grad scheme. I was in central engineering. Central engineering is a bit of a hard one to explain because it kind of is more about the governance of how engineering is used, and you sort of determine what toolkits to use and things like that. And in all honesty, I didn't really enjoy it. It wasn't a placement for me. I just didn't enjoy that sort of engineering. But the great thing about a graduate scheme, and the great thing about my graduate scheme in particular, is that that didn't matter. In my next placement, I could go and find something else that I might be interested in. So I moved from central engineering into Typhoon cockpit group, which is this blurry one in the middle. That's the cockpit of Typhoon. And when there, that was my first sort of real experience of a platform of a real aircraft. And I got to design elements that go in the cockpit. So there are buttons, believe it or not. It sounds really silly, but just have a button on an aircraft. But I do have buttons that I've designed. I have formats on the screens that I've designed that have been approved and are flying now. So you're talking less than a year into my career, and I've already been able to leave an impact, which was an amazing thing to be able to do at just 23 years old I would have been by then. So I then had experience of sort of what an aircraft could do by working out what the cockpit of Typhoon could do. I wanted to know how the aircraft as a whole operated. So a bit of sort of broader scheme and less sort of concentrated on one area. So this top right one here is represents me working on Typhoon Aerodynamics. So it was the first time I ever got to have a look at aerodynamics. I'd focused mostly on fluid dynamics when I was at university. Aero wasn't really part of the maths course. But it was the first time I really got to try aero, and I was working out essentially how variations of the aircraft, whether we'd be able to fly it or not, if we put more fuel, less fuel, if we put different tanks on it, would we still be able to fly? And I just really, really loved my time there. It was really mathsy, it was really sort of focused on sort of MATLAB work and things like that, and I just really loved it. So I kind of thought at that point, I'm going to stick with aerodynamics, and that's what my specialism today. I'm an aerodynamicist. But between my sort of third and fourth placements, BAE Systems invested in a company called Reaction Engines. Now, not many of you will know it. It's quite a small company, but they are working on something called Sabre, which is the synergetic air-breathing rocket engine, if I could get the words out. And essentially what that is a sort of a normal air-breathing engine that you would get on your normal aircraft that would fly today, combined and smushed together with a rocket engine to enable single stage to orbit with this aircraft here, which is called Skylon. So Skylon is a space plane. It takes off from the runway and goes all the way into space without dropping anything back down to Earth, and it lands back down on a runway. It's a really impressive bit of technology. Feel free to ask me questions about it later if you want to, and I'm happily talk about it forever because it's really cool, as is the engine Sabre. But essentially, BAE Systems invested in them, and I kind of just nagged my engineering director to let me go on a secondment down there until they let me go. And so, life lesson learned: if you want something, just nag for it, and eventually you'll get it. But that's essentially what I did. I got seconded down there for 6 months in their aerodynamics and performance team, where I worked on trajectory analysis for this aircraft. So trying to make the most optimal route to space and back down again for two different reasons. Sort of when you're going into space, you want to reduce the fuel you're using because it makes you lighter. And when you're coming back down to space, you want to try and minimize the heat on the aircraft. So there's a whole host of aerodynamic problems there and very mathsy problems, and I adored my time there. So when I finished my graduate scheme, I came back to BAE Systems after being seconded and carried on working with Reaction Engines on sort of future concepts. So I worked on a lot of future concept aircraft that have sort of formed what is now Team Tempest, which I'll talk in a moment. But one of the main things that I was responsible for is anything to do with hypersonics, which is faster than Mach 5, which is pretty fast considering sort of most aircraft max out at about Mach 2, Mach 2.5, and space planes. They were sort of my areas of speciality, as it were. And I got to sort of influence the company's strategy in the space domain as well as in the hypersonic domain. And it was one of those moments in my career where I could really sort of get my teeth into something and leave my mark permanently on the company and the industry. And as a result, I got to essentially tour the world talking about it. I got to do a lot of media that I never thought I would ever do, and I've definitely got better at it. I was very wooden the first time. When this photo up there on the top right was the first time I ever did any sort of like video sort of media, and I was about as wooden as Daniel Radcliffe in the first Harry Potter movie. It was that bad, but I've got better at it, hopefully, over time. So that was sort of my next 2.5 years. So for about 3 years solidly, I worked on space planes and hypersonics and all of that sort of thing. And then the opportunity came up for me to move into a new team and do something a bit different. My heart didn't want to go because I really loved the space plane hypersonic work, but I knew that I needed to have a better understanding of how aircraft as a whole work and not just the outside aerodynamics. So I moved into that team. So now I'm part of Team Tempest. I work on the flight control systems. So Team Tempest is essentially a collaboration between UK industry, so like BAE Systems, Rolls-Royce, etc., and the UK government, looking at what technologies we'll need for future combat aircraft. So essentially what will replace Typhoon in 20, 30 years' time. So it's all a series of technology development and demonstrations. I can't talk too much about it. I'm really sorry. I wish I could. But essentially, I work on the flight control systems at the moment, so developing technologies for what the flight control system could be. For those that don't know, a flight control system is essentially like the central nervous system of the aircraft, so it controls all the actuators, all the movement. It helps you take off, it helps you land, and it helps you stay in the sky. It's a flight safety critical system, so it's really, really, really important you get it right. But unfortunately, I can't actually talk too much about what we're actually playing with, which is a real shame. Throughout the last sort of few years of my career, so I've been an engineer for 6.5 years now, it's kind of blown up in a way I never really expected it to, and I've done a lot of things I never really expected it to. So that sort of top left one there is my way of representing all the STEM outreach I do. So like I say, I've toured the world doing this sort of thing. So that photo was actually from Bahrain, where I got to go and do lessons on magnetism. I'm not quite sure why it was magnetism, but that's what we did. And I got to, that photo was taken in one of the classrooms where I was called a witch, believe it or not, because I'd shown a couple of ring magnets floating on top of each other. And though they all knew the theory and they all knew how magnetism worked, they'd never actually seen it in real life. So when they saw these things floating, they thought I was a witch, which was not sure whether that was the best compliment to get while I was out there, but I really enjoyed it. And it just kind of showed sort of that, all the different experiences around the world that people have with STEM, because while I grew up without sort of that influence, others still have that sort of technical influence, but have never seen it in real life. So that's one of the big things I love doing. This main one on the right here, this one was actually when I got chartered. So I got chartered at 26, I think. No, 25. And the reason I mention my age on that one is because I am actually the youngest person to ever get chartered with Royal Aeronautical Society. Not saying that to brag. The reason I'm saying that is because I had to actually challenge the stereotype around it, because there were sort of bylaws that had been written into the Royal Aero that meant that you couldn't get chartered at a certain age, and it wasn't intentional, it wasn't an age limit they'd put in, but it was these sort of laws that have been made around, so you had to be at a certain level, have a certain number of years experience, things like that, that didn't actually apply to being chartered. So we got to challenge that, and I did manage to get chartered, and that's my cheesy smile when I finally managed to get that certificate. Again, didn't plan for that to happen. I actually got chartered, not by accident, but I wasn't planning on it. I actually applied to get incorporated status, which is one level below chartered. And when I submitted, my mentor just went, "You've actually got everything you need for chartered. The only thing you don't have is your age. So why don't we just submit it and see what they say?" So I submitted it as chartered. It came back and they said, "Yes, we'll give it, like you've earned it, but we're not allowed to give it to you yet." So that was sort of one of those points in my career when another one was kept nagging until they gave it to me. And now that rule is abolished anymore. They've changed the way that it's set up so that doesn't happen to anybody else, which is great. This bottom one on the bottom left here, this sort of just, like I mentioned all the media stuff on my previous slide, but this sort of represents that, and that cackling photo gets used everywhere, and I hate it. But I thought I'm going to own it and actually put it in this slide for you. But one of the great things about being so active in engineering is that you do get around, you do get to do lots of things, and you do get to speak to lots of people, and you get to get your name out there and your face out there pretty easily if you want to. If you don't want to, obviously you don't have to, but it's pretty easy to get yourself into that sort of situation when you are quite well known, which is pretty cool. So I'm gonna talk about some of my career highlights with this. Again, not telling you to brag, this is just sort of shows sort of how the trajectory of my career has happened. Again, it's not been intentional. So back in 2016, I was awarded our BAE Systems Technical Graduate of the Year award, which was a lovely shock and a bit of a surprise, in all honesty, for my work with reaction engines. From there, things kind of just escalated beyond control, and I didn't quite realise how much it was going to take off. So I was awarded Tech Grad, and then because of that, BAE nominated me for the SEMTA Graduate of the Year, which I won in 2017. I was also listed on the top 50 women in engineering in 2017, sorry. And then from there, things again just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. I won the Bee Beamont Award for BAE Systems in 2018, I think, if I remember correctly, which is sort of like an internal award, but across all of our young engineers to sort of recognise my contribution to the space and hypersonic strategy. Because I won that, they then put me onto the Sir Henry Royce Medal for the IET, which I won in 2018. And as part of that, part of that whole package, I was then encouraged to apply for IET Young Women Engineer of the Year, which I will talk about in the middle. And that's that middle one, that middle photo there, which I will emphasise a bit more because it did completely change my life. That was in 2018, and then last year I won the Royal Academy of Engineering's Young Engineer of the Year Award, and then the Royal Aeronautical Society Young Person's Achievement Award, both in 2019. Again, I'm not telling you this to brag, but like, look at all my awards. The reason I'm telling you that is because I didn't plan for this. I didn't have this in the scheme whatsoever. In all honesty, it still blows my mind. And when I won YWE, I was standing about there, and you can see the video. I'm just not prepared for it because it's a bit of a surprise. But it just goes to show that no matter what route you take in, no matter what you study, no matter sort of what you work on, and I'm not one to career plan, to be honest. I like to just follow what I'm interested in and find out and get some experience doing different things. It's not something that I really plan. It just goes to show that you can have an amazing career regardless of sort of whether you're planning your moves every year or whether you just follow what you love, and that's what I do. So YWE, it's a Young Women Engineer of the Year award. It's an award scheme run by the IET every year. As Amber mentioned, they sort of shortlist 6 engineers each year, and there's three awards they give out. And I won the Young Women Engineer of the Year award in 2018. I remember that I was sat there, so this is why Amber says this is a special room, because this is where YWE happens. And I remember being sat there, and Rachel Riley was giving the award, and she said my name, but I had the other names of the finalists in my head on loop the whole time. It didn't even contemplate to me that I would win. And I even said to my parents before, I was like, don't get excited. I don't think this is going to happen. Like, I'm just happy to be in top 6, and that's all I wanted. And then she said my name, and there's a video apparently somewhere, I've not seen it, but I'm scared to see it, where I'm very, very confused because they've not said one of the names that's in my head, which is the other finalist, because I just didn't believe that I would win it. So it took me a minute or two, and then I came up and I didn't have a speech prepared because I didn't think I was going to win it. So life lesson there, always have a speech even if you don't think you're going to win it, because I warn you now, if you just spurn it out on the spot, it's not going to be very good. But I've had the most amazing time with IT and doing YWE, and as you can see, these things are a bit far and few between that you really get to do some amazing, amazing things. So one of the greatest things, and I know they're around the IT TV team, and we do a lot of work with them, and they're just awesome, and they make me look so much cooler in videos than I actually am. So I recommend going and having a look at all the YWE finalist videos, because they sort of show a really good spectrum. Amber will have hers on there, and mine will be there. And there's of different careers that people have been in, what really excites them, how they've got into it. So they're a really, really good place to have a look. I've got to travel again around the world doing lectures and talks and panels and all sorts of things. I've been invited to a lot of fancy dinners, which was a lot of fun that year. I've got to speak to so many young people and children across the country, and that was probably the most rewarding part, because they all just want to save the world, and they see engineering as a way of doing that, and it's just so it just fills you with hope when you talk to them. So I really recommend getting involved in as much of that as you can. And then sort of this middle one here, this was actually a competition we ran with the Beano, and we sent a clarinet into space, because that was, the competition was to design something that you can't live without on Earth, and how you would design it to work on Mars. And the winner designed a clarinet, and it's actually really clever, but that's a real photo. We actually sent it into space. It worked, believe it or not. And we actually have a record for being the first clarinet in space, or not the worst, the first clarinet in space. But I just got to do all these crazy, crazy things. I was part of First Lego League, again, something I'd really recommend looking up. And it's just a whirlwind year where it's like having 2 jobs. So I had my full-time job working in my office, and then I also spent so much time and energy sort of traveling around and speaking to people and talking about engineering. And it's just the most rewarding thing in the world. I really cannot recommend it enough. So, as I mentioned, you get to do an awful lot of press. This has been probably some of the highlights I've had doing that. So, I got to be part of the Royal Academy of Engineering's This is Engineering campaign. It's actually This is Engineering Day today, believe it or not. So I recommend going and have a look at that too. But I got to dress up in a spacesuit, which was great fun on the beach. And I got to do all sorts of things talking about my career as an engineer. I was on Extreme Cake Makers, as you do as an engineer, because they made a cake for the YWE ceremony, and so they had me on there talking about engineering. I got to do a social media takeover for the Science Museum, which is honestly one of the coolest things I've ever done. I've been in podcasts, I've done radio, I've been on Sky News and things like that. You kind of just end up as a bit of a sort of a number to call when they want people to talk about engineering, which is, it sounds like a bit of a strange situation to be in, but it is an amazing thing to do because you really get used to pitching and talking and just being genuinely who you are as part of your role. And I think that's so invaluable when you become sort of a full-time engineer, is being able to just go in and explain things in a really simple, this is how it is, this is what we've done, and this is where we're going sort of thing. It is a really good experience for that, and it trains you up at professionally, not just in the media, if that makes sense. And this is one of the other bonuses. As weird as that sort of picture is, you get a lot of these sort of texts where people have seen you in weird places, like next to a giant fish. I'm in that top left bit there. And it's only small things here and there, but you get a lot of very strange ones. Like my skating coach always sees me in a magazine at the dentist. I don't know why, but she always does. It's good fun. But I think the main thing to sort of get out of all of this is that I've just had so much fun, and you might be able to tell probably from the speed I'm talking about how much I love and how I'm trying to cram it all in this 20 minutes. I do just have the best time. It's all of these are photos that have come out because of the engineering I do, and it's not anything I would have predicted myself doing 3-4 years ago, let alone when I was 16 and deciding I wanted to be an astronaut. You know, just living out my fantasy on either end there. Engineering really can take you in any place, and you don't have to have that plan from the very beginning. So I am going to finish on 3 bits of advice. These are just advice from my personal experience. Take them as you will. My contact details are on there as well. If anyone's got any questions, feel free to message me wherever, absolutely fine. But I do have sort of 3 bits of advice. Take it or leave it, essentially. The first one is that don't be afraid to ask questions. I spent too much of my early career being scared of bothering people or people thinking that I don't know what I'm doing, almost having a bit of a chip on my shoulder thinking I should know everything about aircraft. No, I shouldn't. I had no idea. And I had to sort of get over that fear, and now I just ask whenever I don't know anything. It doesn't matter who it is that I'm asking. It could be our chief engineer, it could be our chief exec, and I'd still ask the question. And often asking the question means that other people don't know either, and you're just addressing a point that really needs to be addressed. That's my first one. My second one is that there is no such thing as a stereotypical career, so don't try and fit into one. And that sounds like a bit of a broad one, but that's what I'm trying to portray with this presentation I've given you, is that my career has not been a normal, you do this role and this role and this role and this role and you get a pay rise, and that's not what my career has been about. I've not even went to university to do engineering. My whole career has been a very unorthodox way into what I'm doing, and I wouldn't change it for anything. I've had the best 6-7 years of my life, and I really, really wouldn't change it. So just because you haven't got this certain experience, just because you're not studying this certain thing, just because you started in one industry and you want to fancy change into another, or you fancy changing roles after a short amount of time, all those things, it doesn't matter. As long as it suits you and what you're interested in, it really doesn't matter what route you take and how you take it. It's completely up to you. So don't limit yourself thinking you have to go a certain route. You just don't in engineering, which is amazing. And then my final third bit of advice, and the reason why I use this photo, this image here, is to be exactly who you are. I know that sounds really vague and a bit cliche, but I really mean it. I use this photo because it's a summary of everything about me. I also like to highlight that it's done by Jamie Diath, who was one of the YWE finalists. She won the Mary George Prize the year before I did. And she does these amazing drawings of a load of engineers and all sorts, doing sort of bringing different parts of their lives together. And there's a lot of sort of different anecdotes to me in that picture. But the reason I use that photo is because if you told me 6-7 years ago that I'd be doing a presentation and end with a photo, an anime version of me, I would have laughed in your face. I would have been like, no, that's not professional. And the more I'm here, the more I realise the word professional doesn't really mean anything anymore. It's completely open to interpretation. When I first started working, I had somebody, not in my company to be fair, but somebody in the industry turn around and tell me that I shouldn't wear my hair curly and that I should either straighten it, cut it, or have it in a plait the whole time or in a bun the whole time because it wasn't professional to have it like it is now. And now I resented that for a while and I did it. I followed it because I believed it. Whereas now I've realized over time that actually what makes me different is what makes me a good engineer. And I'm exactly who I am. I love nerdy things and I love space and aerospace and I love Lego and all the cool nerdy things like that. And I also am a figure skater and a dancer. And I do polar opposites. And all of those things together make me exactly who I am. And that's what makes me a good engineer. So don't sacrifice who you are to try and fit into the mold of something. I know that sounds a bit inspirational talk, but it is really true. Find out who you are and stick to it because you don't need to put yourself into any kind of shell to become an engineer. And I think that's a really important point to end on. So thank you very much for having me. I will hand back over and I'll speak to you in the panel, hopefully. Thank you.